All right, 97.7 Outlaw Radio FM listeners, you already know what time it is. And right here, right now, we actually have a phenomenal New Jersey based hip hop veteran producer. We have Jay Wex right here live on the line, man. How are you doing this evening?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Oh man, doing best I can possibly be, man. Just trying to get through this week, man. Definitely looking forward to the fact that tomorrow is Friday, and you can never go wrong with the weekend.
That is true, and I'm excited for this interview as well. So yeah, can't wait for the weekend either.
But I know you're a busy guy, Jay, so I'm going to dive right into this interview, man. But I want to take you back to the amazing year of 2005, where you actually had an internship at iHeartMedia's radio station, KTU. I was wondering if you can actually tell our listeners the story behind that internship, and of course, how did that opportunity originally arise for you back in '05?
Um, yeah. So I always was into making beats and being a producer. So I went to a school called IAR, Institute of Audio Research in New York City, which at the time in '03 was like the school to go to if you want to be in the music industry. I mean, it was on the radio every day. You want to be in the music business? Come to IAR. We got your future. So I followed my dreams with that. I went to IAR. I finished the course, and they kind of promised you an internship after the fact. And I think almost a whole year went by after I graduated, and I wasn't really in the business like I wanted to be. So I called up the school, and I did a little complaint saying I wasn't satisfied. I finished the whole year and never got an internship. So they said, why don't you come in, do a resume with the dean? And I did that. We sat down, and I remember at the time he had a checklist if I wanted to be in radio, record label, or studio. And I just checked all three on the checklist. And we put together a resume, and the next day I was just at work, and I got a phone call from KTU radio station in New York. And they said, we have your resume here. We want you to come in for an interview for an internship. And I went in, and I passed the interview, and they hired me as an intern, but it was like 8 of us, so there was always competition for somebody to actually get the job after the internship. So I saw that there was some competition, but I had to treat it like no competition, basically. And I just worked my way up, and I had to stand out on the events and make myself known and show interest, but also I was on the promotions team and not a producer. So I had to kind of like go a different way from what I was used to, making beats and just get into promotion mode, and that's what I did. And I got hired there. And shortly after that, they moved me into production. I became a producer and lasted there as long as I did.
I gotta say, man, that's not how you start an amazing career, man. That definitely sounded like it started off the right way, very amazingly and very quickly as well.
It was, but it wasn't, because I definitely had to work my way to be the one guy that they chose to get hired there. At the time when you do an internship, there's no money. It's a free internship. So I had to put aside my actual career of work and figure out if that's what I wanted to do. And by the time I got hired, the pay was like $7 an hour back then. And I thought that was like a good pay. So I said, yeah, sign me up. But I didn't realize how many hours I'd have to put in just to make a couple bucks, But it was worth it. My time in radio was great. And you meet a lot of connects, especially at KTU, is one of the biggest stations in the world.
And while we're actually still on the topic of internships, man, you also had the opportunity to go on to intern at Atlantic and G-Unit Records. I was wondering if you can actually tell our listeners a bit more about that. And of course, what was it like just working with those two monumental labels, man? Because Atlantic and G-Unit, those are back then. G-Unit was one of the biggest hip hop labels out on the East Coast.
That is correct. And as I said before, I did a checklist for record labels, radio stations, and more. And while I was at the internship for KTU, I got a phone call from Atlantic Records to come in. They had a sales position opened internship. And at the time, I was in sales, so I said, okay. And I showed up there in a suit and tie for the interview, told them about my sales background, but also my music background. And within about 5 minutes, they brought in an A&R from the hip-hop department and said, you should not be in sales, you should be in my department. So I ended up interning for the hip-hop department with Sycamore and then moved up to Craig Cowman, who was the CEO, and I was his intern. And, yeah, that was a really good experience. And then from there, I met some people that worked at G Unit and did a lot of events with them. So yeah.
During your time at G Unit, did you ever actually come across or get the opportunity to meet like 50 Cent?
Oh yeah, I never really, when you're on events and you're working and stuff. One thing I learned in radio was to not be like a groupie and not hound the artist, because it may make them not want to go back to that station because of that experience. So I was never really like, it was just a hi and bye, shake hands, dap, nice to meet you type of thing. But I was in the same studios with them, premiering music, and I did some live events with them, doing meet and greets, and got to attend a couple shows without having to pay. So that, for me, that was all the experience right there, because I also grew up on G Unit, and that was one of my favorite groups, especially at that time. That was when they were, like, really on fire. So, it felt good being under that environment, working with them, and even if you're not getting paid for it, it's all about the experience and connect, which I'm still cool with to this day.
And also as well, man, on May 10th of 2014, you actually had the opportunity to actually work alongside New Jersey artist Arsenal the Rebel as well, actually on the song What You Make It. I was wondering if you could actually tell our listeners a bit more about this earlier production. And of course, what was it like just working alongside Arsenal in the studio?
Well, I actually didn't work in the studio with Arsenal, but I met him through my job at the time. I work in the car industry also, and I'm really still into battle rap. So I've seen all the battles, and I used to watch them religiously. And being from Jersey, I always watched Arsenal's battles. And ironically, one day I was watching it, and maybe like the next day, I look outside and I see him outside looking at a car to buy. And I was working there at the time. And I approached him, and it was really him. So we started laughing and joking, and I'm like, man, I watch all your battles. I make music, and I make beats. So he's like, oh, yeah, let me get me a car, and then let me hear some beats. So I ended up finding him a car, and at the time, I started playing him some beats. I think it was actually in the car that he was buying, and he liked one of the beats a lot. So he took it with him, and back in 2014, CDs were still kind of relevant. So I think I gave it to him on a CD, and he came back the next day, and he recorded it in his own studio over the beat, and brought it back to me the next day. And I was just like, wow, that was pretty quick for him to get on that beat. I just played it for him yesterday, so that was my first experience getting someone on a beat that quick, that I actually listened to their music and watched their battle. So it was pretty cool to get that song, and yeah, I like the record. I don't think I ever really put it out, but maybe on SoundCloud.
And I gotta say, man, just by the fact how you told me how quickly he actually jumped on that song, it definitely sounded like he definitely liked and enjoyed what he heard for him to actually get on that project that quickly.
Well, that is true. And, I've always learned, even prior to that, whenever I would email some tracks to people's email, I could never see the reaction to the beat as they're listening to it. So, that was one of my first experiences in a while, playing somebody a beat and watching their reaction. Because for many years in between, I would always email it, and I never really had great luck doing that. And I didn't even know if they liked it or not, because all I had to do was hit them back. Did you hear that beat, this and that? Oh, yeah, I heard it, But with Arsenal, I remember playing it for him, and it was maybe even the first or second beat I played, and he kind of went crazy. He's like, yeah, that's the one. Let me get that one. Send me that one. So I burnt it for him on a CD and gave it to him, and he took it with him, and then he came back from the studio and recorded on it.
And also, man, you were actually the co-founder of E&J Music. I was wondering, how did yourself and E. Harris actually first meet? And of course, what actually made you both decide to launch this production studio?
Shout out to E. He's the one that actually got me into making beats from the very beginning. He was a producer. He would make beats on the original Fruity Loops. He had a couple keyboards in his house, and I went to school. I grew up with him, but I never really knew he was into music until, after we graduated high school and whatnot, and linked back up. And I think it was just, all it took was maybe one time hanging out with him and watching him make beats that made me realize, yeah, this is what I need to do, I always wanted to be in the music industry as a promoter and things like that, but I also know my boundaries, and I never wanted to be a rapper or a singer or anything. So I figured maybe production would be my way in, and I kind of just soaked up everything that I learned from him, you know, and I kind of locked myself in my own basement at the time. I created my own little studio, downloaded Fruity Loops the way he had it, and I just sat in the room for hours and days learning the production and learning the, you know, the how to make a beat. And shortly after that was when I enrolled into IAR and got my whole start in really learning how. But yeah, we met through school, and after that was when I realized he was making music, and I just knew it was something I wanted to do. So he was more the type that, you know, would have the ideas, and I would bring some certain ideas, and, you know, before shortly after that we started kind of like making music for everybody locally, but never really sold beats locally. We just kind of like gave them out just to get the name out there.
And also, just touching base on this phenomenal business you guys got going on, do you guys actually have this set up publicly? That way other artists can send you their music to actually get mixed and mastered and fully produced? Or is this just something you guys have just for yourselves?
No, it's something we kind of had for ourselves, more like a hobby. I think I took it at one point. I started taking it a lot more serious. Like, we really got something here with these beats that no one else got. We were sampling when at the time, you know, sampling was big, but certain samples we had, no one else had. You know, and then when I started going to school for music and learning how to actually play instruments and trying out different things, I realized how to put music together. And we again, for a long time, we did it just for fun and locally. He had a recording studio, and whenever someone would come, we would play them beats and they would get on them. But we never took it as serious as we probably should have to profit off of it and all that.
And also, on September 29th of 2020, you actually teamed up with hip-hop legends Graf and Mickey Fax as well to actually release the single titled Top Chef. I was wondering if you can actually tell our listeners a story behind this song, and of course, what was it like just working alongside those two legends at the same time?
Well, everyone that I'm working with, let me just say this, I have like a friendship with, to where, like, it's not just music. Like, I literally know these people. So with Graf, I've known Graf since like 2004. He was one of the first artists that came to one of my events that I was promoting. And the funny thing is, nobody showed up to this event because it was promoted wrong. And he still stayed, you know, and that was one of the things I respected about him. He drove like 2 hours away, and, you know, regardless of people coming to the event or not at the time, I felt like it wasn't a good look, but he could have from that moment been like, no, I'm not rocking with this guy no more, and he did not do that. We actually became friends, and, you know, whenever we spoke or chilled, it wasn't really always about music. It was more like, you know, I would try to give him beats, but I didn't pressure him for it, you know. And over the years of doing radio and stuff, I kind of just stopped making beats for a little bit and sending them out. And I think we had a conversation one day, and I was like, look, man, I'm not going to retire until I get you on a track. And he goes, you really trying to get me on a track? I said, yeah. So I sent him like maybe one beat that I just created, and almost kind of created it for him in a way. And he took to it, and he did a verse. It was during the pandemic where I guess all people were doing was just recording because they couldn't go out. And I got the verse from him after so many years. So it ended up being on an original beat. But when he gave me the verse, it was just one long verse, no hook. So I knew it was more like a freestyle, and I had to do something with it. And another person I was working with at the time was Mickey Fax. And we did an interview together, and Mickey mentioned how Graf was one of his favorite artists. So I said, hey, I got a record off the air. I got a record with Graf. I think you should get on it. And he was honored to get on it. He wrote his verse in about an hour, sent it back to me the same night, and maybe a week after that they shot the video, and the rest was put out on platforms, Top Chef.
And also, this year, in 2022, you have worked with one-third of Naughty by Nature's Treach, where you and him actually did 4 singles so far this year together. I was wondering if you can actually tell our listeners a bit more about your most recently released single with Treach, titled Free Paper Burn.
Yeah, so I started working with Treach the end of 2021, and I had one record for him with Lazy Bone and Crooked Eye, And he was like, "Where are you getting these features from?" I said, I got some music or whatever." So he said, "We're going to go to a studio instead of doing anything through email." So the first thing we did was we actually linked up at a studio nearby, and I started playing him some records, and he took to a lot of the beats, and we recorded on the spot, and we just started trading back, like, feature ideas, like, okay, I can get Onyx on this record, Fredo, Starr, I can get Sadat X, Mr. Cheeks, and then he said, well, I spoke to KRS-One, let's send something to him. So we went to the studio. Sadat gave me the first verse to Free Paper Burn. He actually picked that beat after I sent it to him. So I took that verse, brought it to the studio with Treach. Treach heard it, went crazy. He always liked Sadat X, one of his favorite artists. So he jumped on the record, and right after he recorded the hook for Free Paper Burn, he just gave me a look like, you know what? This is the KRS-One record that I've been needing. I mean, KRS-One is a super legend as well. So, he sent it to him, and I don't even think it was a week after that we got back KRS-One verse. And from there, it was just history. We knew right there that's the first song we got to put out to get the radios going, the streets going, hip-hop back again with three legends who actually never did a song together. Sadat, Treach, and KRS-One all on the same track produced by me. Original beat, no samples, and that was just the first song we wanted to actually put out to show people we have a Legends album coming, and this is the start of it.
And for the listeners that are actually listening live right now as well, that didn't get the opportunity to hear this song, I actually have it locked and loaded immediately following this broadcast. So everybody that's listening get a taste of Free Paper Burn.
There you go. Let them all hear it. I appreciate everyone tuning in for that, and I hope you guys like it.
And also as well, man, I actually heard that you actually have an up-and-coming album that is currently in the works that will be titled Full Circle. I was wondering if you can actually tell our listeners what they can expect from this up-and-coming album, and of course, what is the anticipated release date?
Okay, so the album idea just is basically what I was saying before, how, like, these artists that I'm working with, like, I've just known them. So to me, this is full circle. The first two groups or three groups I've ever listened to was Onyx, Naughty by Nature, and Wu-Tang, and they really kind of inspired me to really like hip-hop. And being from New Jersey, it was always Naughty by Nature. I had all the album on repeat on cassette. Onyx, they were huge. So when I started to promote my music, I kind of reached out to these guys, and they liked the idea of, getting on some new beats that they never heard before, but they didn't know they would be getting on features with people in the same era. And that just kind of happened like that. So Full Circle is just a matter of artists that I grew up on that are now on my beats. And for instance, Mickey and Graf, Chic Luch and Fredo, and Free Paper Burn, and so much more that I have in store. It was just an inspiration album. I want to put it out soon because it's pretty much done, but you never know what other songs are going to come about over the next couple of months. So I am holding out a little bit. It's not going to be like no Dr. Dre Detox because it's going to come out. I don't have an official release date, but I do know it's going to be within the next 6 months.
But I have to ask, what is next for yourself, J Wax, man? Like, obviously, we just spoke about, the amazing work you've done this year alone with just Naughty by Nature, Naughty by Nature's Treach, and of course, the album that's currently in the works. Is there anything we happen to miss during tonight's broadcast? Anything else you do still want to talk about or promote?
I do have another album coming out with Fredo Starr called Legends Corner, and that is a very well put together album. We worked together on every song. We were constantly on the phone going back and forth about ideas, bouncing ideas off of each other, and just kind of put together an album in less than 2 months. It was crazy to send Fredo Starr a couple of beats and the next day have 4 or 5 songs back in my email recorded on. I just never experienced nothing like that. And I think the first record we did was 5 a.m., and it was a beat that no one seemed to like or gravitate to when I was emailing it to them. It was an original beat, and I thought I had something with that beat when I first made it, and I said, this is going to be the one. And I started sending it out to some of the artists I know, and they were kind of replying back, that's not my style, this and that. So I linked up with Fredo Starr, and when I sent him beats, that was literally the 5th out of 5 beats in an email that I sent him. Wasn't even going to click because I was so discouraged about everyone else not wanting that beat that right away he wrote back, yeah, I need that one, the 5th one. And I said, wow, that actually could work. So when he sent me back the record with him on it, it just took me back to the 90s right away. I thought I had another slam on my hands with that record. I couldn't believe it. The energy he brought, the way that he rapped, the way he broke down the verses and hooks, it was just something different, and I knew I had something with that record and had to find a feature big enough to hold up that record with him. And at the time I was working with Sheik Luch, and I just sent it to him. I didn't even think he was going to get on it as quick as he did. He sent it back, and within a day we had 5 a.m. recorded, and that's when the idea came shortly after that to do a whole album. So the next album we're putting out is Legends Corner with Fredo. It's got like 13 or 14 tracks on it, all produced by Jay Wex, written by Fredo Starr, mixed by Kilroy, recorded at Y-Quab Studio, Purple Haze Studios, and it's just a very well put together album. One of those albums you could put on first song to last on repeat and not skip any tracks. And I'm not just saying that because I made the beats, but I promise you when you hear this album, every song and every beat sounds different from the last. So it doesn't even sound like I made every beat, but I did.
And also as well, Jay, this is the time to interview quickly that I give a chance for the individual that does slide into the radio station airwaves. Just a chance to give like shoutouts to whomever they want to give shoutouts to. But most of all, man, your social media handles. That way our listeners can follow you and stay updated on everything you currently got going on if they're not already doing so.
Yeah, mostly I'm active on Instagram. Is Jaywex with the underscore after it, JAYWEX underscore. You have to put the underscore because apparently there's another Jaywex out there without the underscore as a producer, and that is not me. And I need the followers. I don't need him getting all my followers. So please, Jaywex with the underscore, and on Twitter is JWEXclusive, and Facebook is Jaywex Music. So you can find me there on social media. Mostly my Instagram is where I post all music and samples of stuff that's coming out and behind-the-scenes studio footage and release dates of all my music coming out. And all the links to my music pages on there as well.
And I got to say first... my apologies there, Jay. Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to give a couple shout-outs to, the people that I work with closely. E. Harris, again, producer, Tellin' Powder, Pyro Tracks, Beats by JT. These are all producers that I've been collabing with. Shout out to Fredo and Treach, Sadat X, Mr. Cheeks, Lazy Bone, all the artists that believe in the vision, Graph, and shout out to anyone else who's been tuning in over the last couple of years, seeing that I'm not giving up on this music.
And I got to say first and foremost, Jay, thank you so much, man, for just giving us a bit of your time here this evening, and of course sliding into the 97.7 Outlaw Radio FM airwaves, man. It definitely was an honor and most definitely a privilege, and hopefully down the line we definitely can make this happen again sometime soon.
Oh yeah, I can't wait, man. I appreciate the opportunity for this interview. It's always good to get some recognition, and I really appreciate the love and support you guys have been showing me. Even over the last couple months, I've been anticipating and excited for this interview. So,
hey, man, you're most certainly welcome, man. I like giving credit, man, where it's due, and you're a phenomenal producer. Your work just proves how great you actually are, man. So it was a no-brainer when reaching out to you, man. I wasn't even expecting to get a yes back. That's how much of an amazing producer you are, bro.
And I appreciate you reaching out because I think at the time when we first linked up, you were interviewing Treach, and that's what made me tune in right away. And I kept saying to myself, like, man, the questions you're asking him are really great questions, and I think might stump me a little bit on some questions here, but I was prepared, so.
I got to say, man, a lot of people when they come on for the interviews, back in the day when I first started, people were always saying to themselves, it's going to be the same type of interview, the top 10 rapper questions. Then I tend to still stump people today 4 years into it, man. So Trust me, you're not the only one that feels stumped coming on the air with me.
You asked some you had asked some questions that even I was like, wow, I forgot to do that. With the internships and creating. You had the dates down there and everything, and I'm like, oh, what did I do September 2020? But you nailed it. So.
Hey, man, I got to say, I appreciate the love, man. I always tell artists and producers and DJs and whatnot, if it's on the internet and it has a date, I'll find it. I don't know how, but I will find it.
Yeah, well, it's good to get the recognition. I appreciate that.
Hey, man, I appreciate your time as well, man. Thank you so much, Jay. And, of course, definitely have yourself a phenomenal Friday and, of course, weekend as well.
I will. Thank you for everyone tuned in. Shout out to Canada's #1 station, Outlaw Radio.
Hey, man, thank you so much, man. We definitely shall talk again soon, man. Have a good night.
All right, thanks.